All right. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Alter Aeon Updates. Here we have Dentin, the creator, lead coder, and designer of Alter Aeon. To
Hi,
start off,
everyone.
hi everyone. Just excuse us, it's a little different format that we're used to working with. So, I have a set of questions here, and we're going to do the best that we can. Let's jump right into it. To start off, please tell us a little bit about yourself, such as where you grew up and what your educational background is.
So I I grew up in central Utah in a rural town of maybe 3,000 people at the time. I hear it's up to 6 or 7,000 now, so it's still really small. And this was a long time ago. And when I was 10 or so years old, my dad ended up getting me an old Radio Shack computer, and that's where I first learned to do programming of any sort. And some of my formative memories from my childhood are still about writing programs on that computer when I was 10 and 11 years old.
Hmm.
As I got older, I went into math and physics almost exclusively. But then, but then when I was in school, I was like, well, math and physics isn't really that good of a degree to get a degree in because you can't really get a job easily. And this programming thing, well, I could probably go into programming, but that's just a fad, that
Right.
you'll never be able to make money in that. So I switched to electrical engineering and I got my degree in electrical engineering. And then as soon as I got out of school, it was the mid 90s and people were snapping up programmers left and right. And I got hired on for all intents and purposes as an embedded systems programmer because I knew the hardware and I could write code at the same time. And then after that, I've just basically been doing more and more programming and less electrical stuff as I got older and older.
I also tried to ride that wave, but I came a few years later than you, and the programming jobs were not plentiful by the time I graduated high school and was trying to get into college. So,
Oh, you probably hit the downturn in 2001 when everything was, what was it, the .com boom and then bust.
Yeah, it was the late 90s, right? Yeah, right around the turn of the millennium.
In retrospect, there was actually really a ton of programming jobs available. They were just all in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. So, so you have been living in Pittsburgh for about a year and a half now. How do you like it there?
So I've lived in probably 10 different places across the United States so far. And Pittsburgh is about in the middle of the pack, I guess. Each place has its own special sort of thing, has its culture, its weirdness. Like Portland, for example, has some serious weirdness, but it's also got some stuff that's pretty cool. And Pittsburgh just has a handful of things that are super, super duper annoying. And one of those is the traffic. The traffic here is so bad that that by itself makes Pittsburgh almost uninhabitable. At some level, I'm not real clear how people live here with as bad as the traffic is. The traffic is actually worse than it is in California, where I was at.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But other than that, it's just another place to live. It has snow. It gets unreasonably hot in the summertime. As long as you have AC, it doesn't matter that much. And I live super close to work, so that's good.
Yeah. So you imagine the weather's probably closer to where I live in the Midwest because we're not too far away and there's nothing between us because it's all plains.
Yeah, I think it's not quite as windy. There's enough hills and other things in the area that there's just not that much wind here. But least favorite weather feature ever is wind. So any wind is bad wind.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the game now. Now, to start off with a little history, I know the story behind the name of Alter Aeon with the guys from the Yellow House in Fairbanks and how it's a take on Aeon Flux, but why did you start making the game to begin with?
So I started actually writing the code in January of 1995, but the year before, in 1994, the start of 1994, over Christmas break, the original ROTC slash Loki, he was the Loki who built Vikings on Alter Aeon. He got me into a game called Hidden Worlds, which was an earlier first generation MUD.
Mhm.
And I got super addicted to it. And I ended up playing about 2,500 hours in the first year that I played it.
Wow.
Now, on the plus side, I managed 2,500 hours on the game, and I still got B's in my grades in school. Actually, my grades steadily got better over time. But it was really important to me, and I learned a little tiny bit of how to program on Unix machines from my classes and also from trying to debug the Dentin clients. And at the end of 94, there were some really serious EQ duping bugs on Hidden Worlds. And the implementer decided that rather than try to deal with it because everybody was being jerks, he was just going to take the game down. And the game stayed down for about 2 years.
Really?
And so it's end of 94. They took my favorite game down. Me and the other guys just said, hey, we can build one of these. I think I know how to code something like this. And they said, we know how to build the areas. And that was the start of it.
All right. Cool. You know if Hidden Worlds is still around? Probably not.
I think it is. It came back after a couple of years, but the player base was completely gone. And playing it now, every now and again, I would check on it and I would log in, but I just, like, the magic's gone. It's been far too long. And so many of the things that I thought I remembered about it are actually things that we hated that it didn't have.
Hmm.
And that I added to Alter Aeon later, and I got so used to them on Alter Aeon, I go back to Hidden Worlds and just, well, where's the thing? Where's the color? Why isn't this? Why isn't that? Oh yeah, we did all that on AA because it's super cool to have it, and none of this is actually on Hidden Worlds, and my memory is just fuzzy.
Yeah. I do remember that the color was a big deal. I started in fall of 96, and that was a huge deal back then. I mean, there were a lot of MUDs who were just experimenting with it, and Alter Aeon was ahead of the trend. I mean, you were on the cutting edge then with
We were
color.
we were not just on the cutting edge of color. We were on the cutting edge in that the colors were very carefully picked to mean specific things and to be sparse, so that when you had something that was colored, it meant something.
Yeah.
And for anybody who had vision and played on like the old school Dark Castle variants, the color was just a complete and utter eyesore. It was an assault on your brain, and it didn't make any sense. And everything was random colors all the time, and it was always bold and always highlighted and always as bright as possible. And if you're going to make everything bright and highlighted, you've kind of lost the point of highlighting the things that are important. So we tried really hard to make the color be useful and not just gratuitous.
Yeah. I think you guys did a great job. um, let's move on. Which is your favorite area or areas in the game?
I thought about this for a few minutes. This is one of the questions you gave me warning on. And as much as I hate to say it, it's the Haunted Hills. It's the area I built. And it's a lot of that is because I don't really know that many areas anymore, but I'm really happy with, and I really like and enjoy the story and the background for the Haunted Hills.
Okay.
Like I really like how the story doesn't actually have a bad guy, and how it's just a bunch of unfortunate things that all kind of happened in a terrible order, and how the guy who you want to save ends up being not savable. Like, it just didn't work out for him, but it's not really anybody's fault, you know?
Yeah.
And I really just like how it's not the conventional story, and it goes a little bit deeper than I'm used to seeing in a lot of the older areas, I guess. I don't know how the newer areas are. I haven't played much at high level.
Uh, well, generally they're pretty light on story, but I mean that's been the case for a long time.
Yeah.
And that sounds pretty cool. I've on the flip side, I've actually never played really through the islands, the newbie islands.
Yeah.
It's I've never played this area, the haunted hills.
Yeah, it's just a relatively small area, but it's got a lot of these little sorts of hints. And if you tool around in it for a while and you actually look at things and read things and talk to the ghosts and whatnot, there's a story, there's a sort of picture that emerges from it, and you can actually put together a coherent timeline. Like I thought about what exactly was it that happened in the past, and how did things end up here, and how did they get here? How did things break? How did the plan go off the rails? And what do you do to finally set everything to rest? So it has a coherent storyline in it. It's just a matter of exploring until you find enough pieces to figure out how they all hook together.
All right. Well, that is cool. I will have to go check that one out. Is that on Arceus or
That's on Cordan.
Orden? Okay. Cool. Um, so what is your favorite feature or features about Alter Aeon?
Oh man, I've got a bunch of them. Um, there's also favorite features based on like the type or style.
What do you
From
mean?
well, from the standpoint of just being really good for the game, like being a real net positive for the game, being something that really works well and that makes the game a lot better than it otherwise would be, I'd have to say is instances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instancing has let us do a really amazing amount of stuff, and it's also taken the it's taken a lot of the restrictions off certain kinds of quests and certain kinds of events that we can run in areas, because the area doesn't reset, and because you get a custom copy of it, you can do a lot of one-time things that you wouldn't normally be able to do in an area that repops. So that's a really good one.
Absolutely.
But I also think that a lot of the admin tooling that we have, things like automatic channel ban, automatic silence, the avatar channel, the way that the avatar system is set up, we've refined it a lot of times over the years, but really it works pretty well. We don't really have problems with annoyance characters, and it's not because there's somebody that it's not like there's somebody whose job it is to full-time monitor the channels. We've just
Right.
set things up so that it, for the most part, works. And granted, it's not perfect, but it takes an awful lot of the administrative load off for us to not have to deal with that. And there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes, which I'm sure you've seen that other people don't really appreciate. But man, I appreciate when I see the warnings go off saying that some annoyance character has logged in and tried to spam the channel and was stopped before a single send got out. That's just really cool.
Yeah.
From a I think from a weirdness standpoint, I'm going to go with being able to put yourself in your own inventory. Like that's just one of those things where I thought, hey, this would be cool, and if I do this, I can such and such and such. And so I did it in 1997. And I remember coming up with the idea while I was soaking in the tub one day. Like I'm just bored and I need a bath, so I actually took a bath and I soaked in the tub for a while. And I thought, hey, I could do this. Oh, hey, I could do that. I could put myself in my own inventory, and that was the end of it. I knew I had to do it at that point. The downside is that it's not particularly useful to be able to do that, but it is a really cool feature, I suppose, that every now and again, and being able to pick up cats and like carry cats and dogs and birds around, that's pretty cool, you know.
Yes. Or stuff them into pocket dimensions.
Yep. So those would be my major things that I think are kind of neat about the game, favorite features.
All right. Very cool. So how would you describe your current level of satisfaction with the environment and structure of Alter Aeon?
I think there's two parts to this. And you may not necessarily like one of them. So the part that I've been transitioning to and trying to focus on is the infrastructure and back-end work. And that's always just kind of been a mess because I never really knew what I was doing. And even now, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm constantly working on that, trying to improve it, trying to stabilize it. And at this point in time, I'm moderately happy with it, I guess.
Okay.
I've been able to split the code out and do things I hadn't expected to do really easily. So the code is quite workable on the back end. As far as the game side goes, though, I just have this sort of gut instinct that we've added too much stuff to make the game complicated too fast. And that I would rather that the game be complex and interesting, but be simple. And I don't think that's impossible. I think that if you carefully design things so that they interact in unusual or unique or interesting ways, then you can have a simple system that has a lot of really interesting and complex side effects. But you can also just add a ton of complexity, and then you make the interface hard to use and you make it too hard for people to remember what's going on. And yeah, it makes it complex. Makes it complex, but it makes it complicated in a way that's hard for people to wrap their heads around. And I worry that if we go too far in that direction, that especially for returning players, they won't be able to remember enough to do anything. The game will have moved past them at a rate that they just can't keep up with and can't relearn.
Okay.
So I guess at some level my metric would be older players. I want as an older player to be able to log in my level 30 character and without a whole lot of effort, figure out what its state is, what I can do, and then go start doing stuff. And I don't feel like I can do that right now. I feel I need to take an hour to figure out, well, what is all my equipment? What are my stats? What's this? What do I have here? How do I even find the spell list anymore? And I get the feeling a lot of returning players log in with their character and they're the same way. Like, I don't remember how to play and I don't know how to figure it out.
Okay. All right. We'll have to see what we can do about that.
It's a hard problem, and it's something I wish I had more time to spend on, but I think it's something worth attacking.
All right. All right. Is that good? You had anything else to add?
No.
All right. Well, next question. About 10 years ago, you did an interview with a player named Ouch for the Realnaught Times. In it, he asked you what your plans were for the next 2 to 5 years. You said your goals were to work full-time on Alter Aeon, get a couple thousand players, and add mapping to the official client, the D client. Do you believe that you are still working toward those goals, or have they changed over time?
Well, I think we accomplished the mapping thing.
Well, I know we have the mapping, but I always thought there was like more that you wanted to do with it.
Yeah, there is, and that's actually that's part of the changes that I try to make in terms of room layout and how rooms interact is all part of that long-term plan to add three-dimensional mapping into the game. But that's a bit lower priority than other things at this point. But as to the original question, I don't think a couple thousand players is feasible anymore. And when I got my latest job, I transitioned completely out of being able to work on it full time because that just wasn't feasible anymore. And I don't think that the game can actually support me working on it full time unless I happen to be independently wealthy, and that's not going to happen for a while.
Right.
But as far as getting a couple thousand players, I think that ship has sailed. There are too many other games out there doing too much stuff, and we might be able to grow, but if we're going to grow substantially, I think we'd have to change the game really substantially, and I'm not sure that's the best approach. Part of where I've decided to go instead is to work on the back end so that we can throw up a lot of different games. and so that we can see which ones work and have a stable, so to speak, of games we can connect together and all have be part of the community. I think AA is interesting as a community project, but I don't think that it can be a very large scale project like I had hoped.
Okay. Um, Also, from that interview with Ouch, you said that the hardest part of working on Alter Aeon was staying motivated. Is that still the case?
Not anymore. I would say the reason that it's not anymore is because all of my time is eaten by other shit that I don't really want to do.
Right.
And it's a lot easier to stay motivated on a project that you like when most of your time is spent doing stuff you don't really like.
Yeah, that's you have me and my brother do that for you.
You you guys and Morph take care of an awful lot of stuff, and I really appreciate that. You've basically kept the game going and let me work on the stuff that I really cared about. I know a lot of people haven't noticed it, but the infrastructure underneath, the things like the channel system, the email system, and a lot of other components that people just never see, that stuff has seen an awful lot of work, and the stability of the game has gone up dramatically.
Yes, I would agree with that. As a matter of fact, that was supposed to be my next question. Was asking you about how you're basically migrating stuff towards common platforms, so you can start cloning the game and other stuff like with Stellar Aeon. And are you still working on Interceptor? Is that still a thing?
Interceptor is actually Lexi and Matthias.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah, and I've just been providing some back end sort of support for them. I manage Guide Dog, but Guide Dog is really just kind of a helper for them. It's not a I guess it's a major part of the system in some way, but it's really just bookkeeping and secretarial. Their games are built by them, and they just talk to Guide Dog for some support services, I suppose.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on here. According to mudstats.com, Alter Aeon's average player load peaked in 2016, then dropped the following year. Alter Aeon's own daily user load graphs confirm this. This last winter, we were once again able to achieve over 100 average user load and are poised to return to 2016 status. Some point to level conversion is the reason for the exodus. Why do you think we lost so many players at that time, and what can be done to prevent further such losses?
I think some of it was level conversion, some of it was the backstabbing weapon conversion, some of it was miscellaneous EQ stuff, but almost certainly some of it was both my behavior and the way that I managed things. So there's a lot to unpack there, I guess.
Yeah, it's a pretty complex question. Um,
As far as fixing it, because that's really the operative thing, the part that I have control over, which is my own behavior and the way that I've handled stuff. There's two parts to that. I've gotten to where I care a lot less about the game, and I'm willing to just let things slide for longer and be easier about it. And that seems to work better for some of the players. The downside is we don't move as fast. As far as staying away, because I think that me just not talking to anybody is actually the ideal outcome in a lot of cases. Because after 25 years, I just don't have the tolerance for it. And it's better for me. It's better for me to just sit back and shit post or be completely goofy or not contribute anything to the conversation at all than if I were to actually go through and read the back scroll and get crabby about it. That would probably be bad for everybody.
yeah.
So I just let things go. I just don't pay attention to it. I let you guys and the channel moderators, for the most part, deal with everything. And then if it comes across my screen when I'm reviewing code from you or from Drock, that's when I talk to you guys about it. I guess the answer is getting me out of the development picture is probably a big part of it.
All right. Are you still here, able to hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Just getting a little bit of, I don't know, that metallic sound. It's kind of like a reverb.
I could talk about that from my signal processing days, but it would bore everybody.
Why don't we move on then? Some other questions here. Where's the game server currently located?
Which one? We got 3.
All right, all 3 then.
There's one in California, there's one in New Jersey, and there's one in Atlanta.
Okay. What's the strategy behind having 3 of them?
One of them has the wiki and the forum, and that one is by itself. The reason that one is by itself is because the wiki and the forum are written in PHP and they talk to MySQL.
Okay.
And I wouldn't trust either of those things as far as I could throw them to be secure. So they are on their own box where they can't do any damage to anything that actually matters.
I see.
The server in Atlanta is primarily for Git hosting, for Mush, and for a handful of other things. It's basically an archive server of sorts. And then the primary server is in New Jersey, and it's got all kinds of stuff on it.
Okay. Let's see. You already talked about the D client. Did you have any more? Did you want to add to that?
Other than we're not
what you're working on.
Yeah, we're not abandoning it. I've been doing a lot of work on the D client primarily to get the common pieces split out so I can make a Stellar Aeon client.
Okay.
There's a lot of similarities between the two, or rather there's a lot of pieces that I can use between the two of them. And it doesn't make sense to just photocopy it and then have to maintain both of them. So I'm trying to do proper software engineering on it. And that just takes a long time. But on the plus side, the original D client was basically a piece of crap from the start. And it was a piece of crap because of the toolkit and because of the way that I put it together, because I really didn't know what I was doing at the time. And now I know a little bit more and I'm able to fix some of that. But really, it does need a lot of cleanup to get it to the point where you and Drock, for example, can actively start developing on it. And I'd like to get to the point where we can get a lot more stuff into the client. I at some point want to get actual 3D rendering into it so that we can start rendering the landscape as you walk through the world. But that's relatively far out at this point.
How about music?
Getting proper music into it the way that it stands right now would probably take me about 3 days of solid effort. The downside of that is that there's a lot of other stuff around that. And really, it's probably more like 2 weeks to do cleanup and extraction and actually get it ready to do that correctly instead of just throwing some crap together.
Right.
But it's not impossible. I did think quite a bit about how to do this and the way to set it up. But right now, it's just effort. And unfortunately, it's not simple effort either. It's actually it's something you've got to think hard about, because if you get it wrong, then you're supporting it for the next 3 years.
Okay, I understand. Sounds like kind of a thorn bush. So
I do plan to get music support in at some point in the near future, simply because I want it for SA as well. And there's no reason that can't be a common component.
Cool. All right. Let's see. You mentioned Stellar Aeon a couple of times. Now, I have to admit, I've never played it, so I don't know anything about it. Can you tell us what it is?
Well, it's not a MUD. It's a text-based game, but it's kind of like God Wars, where it has an open coordinate system. You don't really have rooms. The only place that there's rooms at all is in the starport. But once you're on your ship and you're flying around in space, and you can go to coordinates, and you can be in between coordinates. So it's a very different sort of environment than most people are used to. I primarily built it because I've always wanted to build a space exploration game, even from the early days when I was a kid. And one of my favorite games when I was a teenager was Starflight 1, the very first Starflight game. And it had something like 800 planets on 200 different star systems, and you could fly around and find fluxes, and it had all this backstory and everything else.
Hmm.
I think part of the reason that I like Haunted Hills is that I designed Haunted Hills to have the hints and the storyline set up the same way that the original Starflight had, where if you just go exploring and you just go looking for clues, you will find things. And one day you'll stumble across Earth and you'll scan it, and there will be the continent of Africa.
Hmm.
So I've always wanted to do that ever since I played it. Even before I played it, I've always wanted to have a space game of some sort. And this has just been a long-term sort of desire for me. So that's what I'm putting together. And I'm putting together the thing that I always wanted, but I never had.
Okay. So what is Guide Dog Games? What is the purpose of that?
It is secretarial for people like Lexi and Matthias from VGA Games, and basically it provides them a reasonable way to do the monetary transactions. It gives them a little bit of storage. I give them Git space, so I'm involved in their project pretty heavily. It's far from self-service, but they're the ones that build the game. I'm just kind of supporting it.
All right.
And that's really all it's for.
All right. Sounds good.
The the operative thing there is that they told me they were making a game, and they were talking to me about the stuff that they were going to have to do to both copy protect it and to get people to actually pay for it and everything else. And I said, this is absolutely terrible. There has got to be a better way. Let's throw together something cheesy and see if it works. And we ended up getting Guide Dog out of it. And the Guide Dog system is the same system that AA uses for its accounts. So we're actually using the Guide Dog system primarily as the AA account server. It just happens to also do this stuff for VGA.
Okay. That works with Stellar Aeon too, right?
Yep. And that's part of the common infrastructure stuff that I was talking about. We have a common account system, and it's part of the reason that you can't register somebody else's name on SA. It's because the account server won't let you do it.
All right. So we've got a few more questions here. So these are more kind of softball personal questions. What is your favorite kind of food?
Oh, I don't know that I really have any. I have a whole bunch of stuff that I like and a few things that I don't, but I don't know that I actually have a favorite.
Okay, that's fair enough.
There's easily a dozen different things that I think are great. Like bacon is awesome, but so are peas and green beans and salmon and beef soup and vegetable soup, and sometimes a salad with Tabasco sauce on it is great. So asking me that question is going to get you noise.
All right. Well, at least you're getting a balanced diet, it sounds like.
I try.
Now, you like going to the gym fairly often. What's your workout routine like?
Let's clarify that. I do not in any way, shape, or form like going to the gym.
Okay.
I find going to the gym to be a colossal waste of time and effort. It is hard. It is irritating. It sucks. And the stronger I get, the more I can tolerate the suckage before I have to leave. But it never doesn't suck. It's always just awful. The only reason I go to the gym is that it's necessary to keep me from dying. If you don't exercise, you lose literally years off your life. And I like things enough that I'm willing to go to the gym to try to counter that.
All right.
Yeah, it is never easy. Going to the gym is never easy, but you have to decide that it's worthwhile. And if it is, then you go anyway.
Right. All right. Let's see. If I recall correctly, you have a black belt in Shaolin Do Kung Fu. Do you still keep up on it, and do you follow any other martial art disciplines?
No, I don't follow up on it anymore. I am probably no longer even close to a black belt at this point. Uh,
Not even with going all to the gym.
I I am reasonably fit in that regard, but I've forgotten most of the forms. I It would take me a while to get that back. But on the plus side, knowing how to beat people up just isn't a really useful skill anymore. Like I can't I haven't really even ever beat up anybody even though I had the skill to do so. And I would rather work on AA.
Okay, fair enough.
So if I have the time to spend, I'm not going to spend it doing martial arts. I'm going to spend it programming because I really enjoy programming.
All right. Um, Next question. You used to like a genre of music that you called chibi techno. I think it's generally better known as nightcore. Do you still like that kind of fast, high pitched music, or are there any other kinds of music that you like?
Yeah, I really do like Nightcore even now. The problem with Nightcore though is that there's just not very much music that Nightcores well. You can speed up anything, but an awful lot of stuff when you speed it up just sounds like crap. And so finding the right songs to Nightcore, and I ended up with probably 10 or 15 hours worth of Nightcore mixes, and I think I got all of the good Nightcore mixes on YouTube as a result.
Probably.
So so I just kind of keep those around and I listen to those from time to time, but it's it's not something I listen to all the time. As far as other genres of music, um, so similar to Nightcore, there's a lot of psytrance out there, but there's one guy in particular. I believe his ID was Cabbage 1977, Cabbage with a K, and he had something like 150 multiple hour trance mixes, and it was all instrumental psytrance with a bass line. And there's some really, really good stuff in there. Even nowadays, I'll sometimes just throw on one of those and listen to it for a couple of hours because it's really nice background music. As far as as far as just sheer hatred and anger, I'm not sure that there's anybody that I really appreciate as much as Strapping Young Lad. The old 1990s Strapping Young Lad is just brutal, and they have a handful of songs that they are composed of razor blades and hate, and every now and again you want that in your system, and that band does a great job of it. As far as death metal goes, I've got death metal is has a whole bunch of different styles. So there's just high speed, super fast, interesting death metal, and for that there'd be like Tenebrosis and probably Diabolus Incarnate. There's a lot of melodic death metal, but I've found over the years that I pretty much just listen to Winter Sun, old school Children of Bodom, and basically every Kalma album ever. For some reason, the guys in Kalma, they have 7 or 8 full albums now, and there is only one of them that I don't like very much. All of the remainder, I can just listen to the entire album and be happy. It's really good stuff. And then over the past couple of years, I've found some really down tempo death metal that's got a lot of classical influences, I suppose. And that would be Aquilus and Masarthim are the two that I've been listening to recently. That I should probably stop there. I'm just going to talk about music for an hour.
Hey, that's fine. I asked the question. I don't know anything about anything like that. I know death metal has different categories to it, and they're different from one another. But beyond that, that's beyond it's beyond anything I listen to.
Music's really been a big part of my life for a long time. And so for me to not have music around is just really uncommon.
Do you play music when you're coding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's something complicated, I have to turn the volume way down.
Oh, okay. See, I can't do that. It just distracts me. Uh, let's see. Do you still play bass guitar?
Yeah, I have it sitting here behind me, actually. I don't play it in a band. Being in a band takes too much time, and I don't have time right now because I have a job.
Right.
But I still get the bass out every now and again. Sometimes I'll just be listening to something and I'll think, I want to play along with that. So I'll grab my bass and I'll play along with it.
Can you play something for us?
No,
No. Oh, come on.
no, that's never what it was for. It was always for me, not for other people.
All right. That's keep your secrets. All right. Last question here. Okay. Recently, I've started playing a couple old strategy games again. Castle 2, Siege and Conquest, and Civilization 2 Test of Time from 1992 and 1999, respectively. Do you ever still play old games like that, like the original StarCraft?
I played StarCraft for a long time, and the guy who got me into StarCraft was just some college student who lived across the hall, and he always wanted to play PvP. And he would always just like get on my ass about not building this and not building that, and why'd you build that in that order? That's not as fast. And so he trained me to basically PvP, and I never actually beat him, but he trained me to play that way. And then one day I went and played with a bunch of people from IBM because I was working at IBM at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was eye-opening. That was educational. Yeah, I discovered that I was a whole different level, and I ended up basically being their GM. And I would switch teams as appropriate to make sure that nobody got completely flattened.
Hmm.
So I played a lot of StarCraft. I haven't played it recently. I'm afraid to get the newish one because I know I'll disappear for a month, maybe more.
Yeah, you never played StarCraft 2?
Never played StarCraft 2, but I at some point would really like to. And every now and again, I get out my DOS emulator and I play my old Starflight as well.
Oh, do
But I
you?
think, yeah, but I think those are the only two real games that I play that are ancient. The original Starflight, even now, it's it is hard to put into words just how much of a technological feat that thing was. It had some real serious computer science and information theory stuff in it. It was not built by a bunch of people in their by a bunch of uneducated people in their basement. It was built by professionals who really knew what they were doing and did a really, really good job on it. And it's just an amazing game.
Cool. I'll have to check that out sometime. Starflight. Did they make any
Yep.
sequels?
Yeah, there was a Starflight 2, and then there was a quasi sequel, which was built by some of the same people later, but was a completely different style. But the original Starflight is the one that you want to play.
Okay. All right there, Denton. That's the end of my list. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
Um, no, not really. That covers an awful wide part of it.
All right. Well, we've been at this about an hour now, so I think that should do. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. It's been a learning experience, especially the just trying to talk to one another and record it properly and all that nonsense. But I really do appreciate you taking the time. I know you got things to do, and um, I'm sure the players will appreciate it too.
I think that this would actually be a relatively good idea, and maybe we should get some of the other world builders as well, if we
Yeah, definitely.
can. Just because it's sometimes it's hard to remember that there's people on the other side, and that we actually do think really hard about some of the design criteria and the changes that we make. Now, granted, not all of them, but there usually is a method to the madness, and I think things like this could give us a lot more transparency to the players, and maybe they would appreciate that, maybe not.
We'll have to work on Morpheus. He's kind of shy about doing something like this.
Well,
I've been I
if he's not comfortable doing it, I totally understand. Nobody wants to. Yeah, it can be hard, and that's fine if he doesn't want to. But I'm
yeah.
willing to do so. I think it's a good idea.
All right. Well, we will see about hitting you up maybe in a few months from now.
All right.
I think probably after the summer event.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Well, this has been uh, interview with Dentin, creator, lead coder, and designer of Alter Aeon, and signing off.